Welcome to part 2 of our story. I will attach part 1 at the end of this video for those who have not watched. If you haven't subscribed, please do. Now let's go. The next morning didn't feel like a new day. It felt like a continuation of something Harriet Williams hadn't finished surviving. The sunlight over the Atlanta skyline was just as bright as it had been the day before, sharp, golden, relentless. But this time, it didn't feel motivating. It felt exposing. Harriet stepped out of her car slowly, her movements more controlled than usual, like she was trying to hold something together that kept threatening to come apart. Her reflection stared back at her from the glossy surface of the car door. Perfectly dressed, perfectly composed, but her eyes gave her away. She hadn't slept. Not really, because every time she closed her eyes, she saw the same moment. Clarence Jones walking into that room. The shift in the air, the silence, the realization. CEO, her boss, the man she had argued with, the man she had challenged, the man she had unknowingly disrespected on her first day. Harriet exhaled slowly, gripping her bag tighter. "Get it together," she whispered under her breath. But the words didn't stick, because nothing about this felt normal anymore. Not after yesterday. Not after him. The moment she stepped into Blackwell Global Enterprises, she felt it. Not saw it. Felt it. The difference. It wasn't loud. It wasn't obvious. But it was there. People looked at her. Not openly. Not directly. But enough. Quick glances. Whispers that stopped when she walked past. Conversations that shifted tone the moment she entered a space. Harriet kept walking, her posture straight, her expression neutral. But inside, her thoughts were spiraling. They know. The idea came suddenly. Then grew. They saw something, heard something, noticed something. Her heels clicked sharply against the polished marble floors, echoing louder than they should have in the structured silence of the building. She reached her desk, sat down, opened her laptop, closed it again. Because her hands weren't steady, she inhaled slowly, then exhaled. Focus. But her mind refused to cooperate, because it kept going back. To the elevator, to the parking garage, to the way he had said her name, to the way he had looked at her like she mattered. And then, the meeting, the complete absence, the cold distance, the erasure. Harriet pressed her lips together, her fingers tightening slightly against the edge of her desk. Why would he pretend not to know me? The question had been sitting in her mind all night. Unanswered, unresolved, uncomfortable, because no matter how many ways she tried to rationalize it, nothing made sense. If he didn't care, why say her name in the garage? If he didn't recognize her, why look at her like that in the elevator? And if he did recognize her, why act like she didn't exist in front of everyone else? Harriet. She looked up quickly. Victoria Smith stood beside her desk, tablet in hand, her expression as composed as ever. But this time, there was something else. Something subtle. Something observant. "Good morning," Harriet said quickly, forcing steadiness into her voice. Victoria nodded once. "You're early. I didn't want to be late again." A pause. Victoria studied her for a second longer than necessary, then said, "That would be wise." Harriet swallowed slightly. There was again that tone, not harsh, but not neutral either. Measured. Intentional. "Is there anything I should prepare for today?" Harriet asked. Victoria's gaze held hers briefly, then shifted. "There's always something to prepare for here," she replied. "Not helpful, not comforting, just true." Victoria turned to leave, then stopped. "Harriet," she added. "Yes." "Stay focused." Harriet nodded. "I will." But as Victoria walked away, Harriet couldn't shake the feeling that the words meant more than they sounded like. The morning moved, but not normally. Not for Harriet. Every task felt heavier. Every interaction felt watched. She noticed it more during meetings, during conversations, even in passing moments. People weren't just seeing her. They were observing her, trying to figure something out. At one point, she caught 2 employees glancing in her direction before quickly looking away. Whispering. Harriet's stomach tightened. This is bad. Her thoughts raced again. Did he say something? Did someone notice something in the meeting? Or worse, did I do something I don't even realize yet? She looked down at her screen again, pretending to focus on the data in front of her. But her mind wasn't there. It was somewhere else. Still stuck in that room. Still stuck on him. On the way he had stood. The way everyone reacted to him. The way he commanded the space without trying. And the way he had looked through her like she wasn't worth acknowledging. Harriet exhaled sharply, pushing back slightly from her desk. "No," she whispered quietly. "I'm not doing this." She wasn't going to let this spiral. She couldn't. Not here. Not in a place like this. Because one thing was becoming painfully clear. Blackwell Global Enterprises didn't tolerate weakness. And right now, she felt like she was seconds away from showing it. Her phone vibrated suddenly on the desk. Harriet froze. Her eyes dropped slowly to the screen. Unknown number. No contact name. No preview. Just a single notification. Her pulse shifted instantly. Not faster. Sharper. Like her body already knew before her mind caught up. She hesitated, just for a second, then picked up the phone. Her fingers hovered over the screen. Then tapped. The message opened, and everything in her went still. "We need to talk." No name. No explanation. But she didn't need one. Because there was only one person who could make 3 words feel like that. Heavy. Controlled. Unavoidable. Harriet swallowed slowly, her grip tightening slightly around the phone. Her eyes lifted instinctively, scanning the office, the glass walls, the movement, the light. And for a brief second, she felt it again, that same awareness. Like somewhere in this building, he already knew she had read it. Her heart settled into a slow, steady rhythm. Not calm, not panic, something in between, something sharper. Because whatever this was, it wasn't over, not even close. And somehow, this felt bigger than yesterday, more deliberate, more dangerous. Harriet looked back down at the message, and for the first time since everything started, she didn't feel confused. She felt certain of one thing. This conversation was going to change everything. And then, she received a message from him. Harriet didn't reply to the message immediately. She couldn't, not because she didn't know what to say, but because anything she said would make it real. And this already felt too real. Her phone remained in her hand for a few seconds longer than necessary before she slowly set it down on her desk. Her eyes lingered on the screen, as if expecting another message to appear. None did. Of course not. He didn't seem like the kind of man who repeated himself. Harriet exhaled quietly, straightening her posture. Around her, the office continued its usual rhythm, controlled, efficient, bright. But she wasn't part of it anymore. Not fully. Because now there was something else pulling her attention. Something higher. Literally. The executive floor. Her eyes lifted instinctively toward the glass panels above, though she couldn't see anything beyond reflections and light. Still, it felt like she was being called. Not invited. Not asked. Called. And somehow, that difference mattered. Harriet. She turned. Victoria Smith stood a few feet away, tablet in hand as always. But this time, her expression was different. More precise. More intentional. "Yes," Harriet replied. Victoria held her gaze for a brief moment before speaking. "You've been requested upstairs." Harriet's heartbeat shifted slightly. "Upstairs?" Harriet asked, though she already knew the answer. Victoria gave a small nod. "Executive level." Silence stretched for half a second. Then Harriet stood. "Okay." She didn't ask why. Didn't ask who. Because she already knew both answers. Victoria turned, already walking. "Come with me." Harriet followed. The walk to the private elevator felt longer than it should have. Not because of distance, but because of awareness. Every step echoed louder in her mind. Every passing glance from coworkers felt sharper now. More noticeable. More knowing. Harriet kept her eyes forward. Her posture steady. But inside, her thoughts were racing again. This is it. The private elevator doors stood at the end of the corridor, sleek and reflective, set apart from the others like they belonged to a different system entirely. Victoria stopped in front of it, tapped her access card. The doors opened instantly. Harriet stepped inside. Victoria didn't follow. Instead, she turned slightly, her expression unreadable. "He's expecting you," she said simply. Then the doors slid shut. Silence. Complete silence. Harriet stood alone in the elevator, the glass walls revealing the city stretching far below. The sunlight was stronger here, brighter, cleaner, almost unreal. She swallowed slowly, her fingers tightening slightly at her sides. This felt different from yesterday. The elevator ride before had been unexpected, accidental. This was intentional, controlled, designed. The elevator moved. Smooth, silent, unstoppable. Harriet watched the numbers rise. One floor, then another. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass panel. Calm on the outside, unsettled beneath it. What is this? A test? A warning? A correction? Her thoughts cycled through possibilities, none of them settling long enough to feel certain. The elevator slowed, then stopped. A soft chime echoed. The doors opened. The executive floor was different, not just in appearance, in atmosphere. It was quieter, brighter, more controlled, like every detail had been carefully curated to remove anything unnecessary. Harriet stepped out slowly. The hallway stretched wide, lined with glass offices and polished surfaces that reflected light in clean, precise lines. No clutter, no noise, no room for mistakes. And at the far end, one door stood slightly apart from the rest. Closed. Harriet didn't need directions. Her feet moved before her mind fully caught up. Each step felt deliberate, measured, like she was walking into something she couldn't step back out of. She reached the door, paused, then knocked. Once. Clear. Controlled. Come in. His voice. Calm. Low. Unmistakable. Harriet pushed the door open. Clarence Jones stood near the floor-to-ceiling window, the city behind him glowing in bright daylight. His posture was relaxed, but not casual. Controlled. As always. He didn't turn immediately. Instead, he finished whatever thought he had been holding, then slowly shifted his attention toward her. His eyes met hers. And just like that, the air changed. Not dramatically, not visibly, but enough. Close the door, he said. Harriet did. Click. Silence settled again, this time heavier. She stood near the entrance, unsure how close to move. He didn't tell her. He simply watched her for a second longer than necessary, then turned slightly, walking toward his desk. Sit, he said. Harriet obeyed, because this wasn't a conversation where hesitation felt safe. She sat across from him, her posture straight, her expression controlled. But her heartbeat hadn't slowed, not even slightly. Clarence took his seat across from her, opened a file, not rushing, not acknowledging anything beyond the present moment. Professional, distant, like yesterday had never happened. You'll be assisting with a new project, he said calmly. Harriet blinked once. That was it. No mention of the elevator, no mention of the argument, no mention of the message. Just work? She nodded slowly. Okay. His eyes lifted briefly to meet hers. Sharp. Focused, unreadable. It requires discretion, he continued. Accuracy, and the ability to adapt quickly. Harriet held his gaze this time. I can do that. A faint pause. Then he nodded once, like he had expected that answer. Of course he had. He slid a file across the desk toward her. Harriet looked down at it, but didn't touch it immediately, because something didn't add up. This felt too simple, too clean. After everything that had happened, Is there anything else? She asked carefully. Silence. Clarence leaned back slightly in his chair, his gaze still on her. And for a brief second, that distance shifted. Not gone, but thinner. You're wondering why you're here, he said. Harriet didn't deny it. Yes. A pause. Then, you'll understand soon enough. Not an answer. Not really. Just enough to keep her thinking. Her fingers finally moved, picking up the file. But her eyes lifted back to him again, because the real question hadn't been answered. Is this a test or punishment? And somehow, she felt like it was both. Clarence stood, the movement subtle but final. The conversation was over, or so it seemed. Harriet stood as well, holding the file now, waiting for dismissal, for something, anything. Then he spoke again, calm, controlled, unavoidable. You will work directly under me now. The shift didn't happen gradually. It happened instantly. One moment, Harriet Williams was a new hire trying to find her place inside Blackwell Global Enterprises. The next, she was sitting at a desk that didn't belong to her, on a floor she hadn't earned yet. Working under a man she still didn't understand. Your access has been updated. Victoria Smith's voice was as composed as ever, but there was something different beneath it now. Measured, observant. Harriet stood beside her new workstation, sleeker, more minimal than the one downstairs. Positioned near a glass wall that overlooked the entire city, it felt less like a desk and more like a test. Effective immediately, Victoria continued, tapping her tablet. You're part of the executive support team. Harriet nodded slowly. Understood. A pause. Then Victoria added, directly reporting to Mr. Jones. There it was. Said out loud. Clear. Final. Harriet's fingers tightened slightly at her sides, but her face remained neutral. I'll make sure I meet expectations, she said. Victoria's gaze lingered on her for a second longer than usual. You'll need to exceed them, she replied. Then she turned and walked away. The first hour passed in a blur. Emails, documents, briefings. Information came fast, too fast, and none of it slowed down for her to catch up. Every file she opened felt like it assumed she already knew something she didn't. Every task carried weight. Every detail mattered. Harriet's eyes moved quickly across her screen, absorbing what she could, organizing what she couldn't. Don't fall behind. That thought repeated in her mind like a warning. Because here, falling behind wasn't just failure. It was exposure, and exposure was dangerous. Miss Williams. Harriet looked up instantly. A senior analyst stood near her desk, holding a tablet. Mr. Jones requested these figures compiled and adjusted before the next meeting, he said, handing it to her. Harriet took it. When is the meeting? The man hesitated, then said, 10 minutes. Her breath paused for half a second. 10 minutes? She nodded anyway. I'll have it ready. He didn't question her, didn't doubt her. He simply turned and walked away. Because in this environment, expectations didn't wait for readiness. Harriet moved quickly. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, scanning data, adjusting projections, aligning numbers that didn't want to cooperate. Her heart rate increased, but her movement stayed controlled, focused, precise. She didn't allow herself to panic. Not yet, because panic would slow her down, and slowing down was an option. The meeting room filled quickly. Executives, analysts, assistants, everyone in position before he even arrived. Harriet took her seat slightly to the side, not hidden, but not central either. She placed the tablet in front of her. Ready, prepared, or at least as prepared as she could be. The door opened. Clarence Jones entered. And just like that, the room aligned. No announcement, no acknowledgement, just presence. He moved to the head of the table, placing his tablet down with quiet precision. Let's begin. The meeting started immediately. Fast, structured, unforgiving. Harriet followed along, her eyes moving between her notes and the screen displays around the room. She kept up, barely, until Miss Williams. Her name, spoken calmly, clearly, in front of everyone. Harriet looked up instantly. Yes, sir. Clarence's gaze was on her now, direct, unwavering. Walk us through the revised projections. Her pulse spiked, but her expression didn't change. She picked up her tablet, standing smoothly. Based on the adjusted market inputs, she began, her voice steady. We've projected a 6.2% increase in... Incorrect. The word cut through the room cleanly. Harriet stopped, just for a fraction of a second. The room went still. Not shocked, not surprised, just attentive. Clarence didn't raise his voice, didn't shift his tone, but the correction landed harder than anything loud could have. Harriet swallowed slightly, glancing down at her tablet. Her fingers tightened. She had checked those numbers. Twice. Recheck your data, he continued calmly. Your baseline is off. Heat rose in her chest. Not from embarrassment, from pressure, from being seen, from being corrected in a room where mistakes didn't belong. But she didn't freeze, didn't break. She adjusted quickly, scrolled, recalculated, then lifted her head again. You're right, she said evenly. The baseline should be adjusted to reflect the revised entry model. That brings the projection to 5.4%. A pause. Clarence watched her, then nodded once. Continue. The meeting moved on. like nothing had happened. Like that moment hadn't just carved itself into her memory. But Harriet felt it. Every second of it. The weight. The exposure. The expectation. When the meeting ended, the room shifted back into motion. Chairs moved. Conversations resumed. Executives gathered their things. But Harriet stayed still for a moment longer, her hands resting lightly against the table, her breathing controlled. You didn't break. The thought came quietly, and for a second, that mattered more than the mistake. Around her, people began to leave. Some glanced at her, not unkindly, not warmly either, just aware, like they had witnessed something, and filed it away. Harriet stood slowly, gathering her things, ready to leave, ready to step back into the controlled rhythm of the day. Everyone else can go. Clarence's voice cut through the room again. Calm. Final. Movement paused briefly, then resumed. No one questioned it. No one hesitated. Within seconds, the room cleared. Until it was just the two of them. Again, the silence returned. But this time, it felt different. Sharper. Closer. He didn't look at her immediately. He simply closed his tablet. Then finally, his eyes lifted, meeting hers. And in that moment, Harriet knew this wasn't about the numbers. It never was. Because after the meeting, he'd asked everyone to leave. Except her. The silence didn't break. It tightened. Harriet Williams stood at the far side of the conference table, her tablet still in her hand, though she wasn't looking at it anymore. Across from her, Clarence Jones remained seated, calm, composed, exactly as he had been throughout the meeting. But now, there was no one else in the room. No executives. No observers. No structure to hide behind. Just the two of them, and everything that had been left unsaid. Clarence closed his tablet slowly, placing it on the table with deliberate precision. Then he stood. The movement wasn't abrupt, but it shifted the entire space. Harriet felt it immediately. That subtle pressure. That quiet control. He walked around the table toward her. Not quickly, not slowly, just enough to close the distance without making it obvious. Harriet didn't move. She refused to, because stepping back now would mean giving something away she wasn't ready to lose. He stopped a few feet in front of her. Close enough. Not too close, but intentional. Always intentional. You made a mistake, he said calmly. Harriet's jaw tightened slightly. I corrected it, she replied. I noticed. A pause. The air between them sharpened. This wasn't about the meeting. She knew it. He knew it. And the fact that neither of them said it directly made the tension heavier. Harriet exhaled slowly, setting her tablet down on the table beside her. If this is about the projection, it's not. His voice cut in, quiet but firm. Final. Her eyes lifted to meet his. And for the first time since the meeting ended, there was something different in his expression. Not just control. Something underneath it. Something restrained. You know what this is about, he said. Harriet held his gaze. For a second, she considered denying it. Pretending. Deflecting. But something in her had already reached its limit. No, she said instead. I don't. A pause. Longer this time. His eyes searched her face like he was measuring something. Then, you argue with strangers often? He asked. The question landed sharper than it sounded. Harriet blinked once, then let out a quiet, almost disbelieving exhale. So that's what this is? She said. We're doing this now. You spilled coffee on me, he replied. And you provoked me, she shot back instantly. The words came faster now, less controlled, less filtered, because the frustration she had been holding in all day, all night, was finally finding a way out. His expression didn't change much, but something in his posture shifted. You were late, he said. I know I was late, Harriet snapped. You've made that very clear. You weren't paying attention, and you were standing in the wrong place. Silence. The tension spiked. Sharp. Immediate. And for a second, it felt like they were back in that parking garage. Except this time, there was no anonymity. No distance. Just truth. Harriet took a step closer. Not aggressive, but not retreating either. You don't get to act like that didn't happen, she said, her voice lower now, but more intense. You don't get to pretend I don't exist in a room full of people after looking me in the eye and say my name like you knew exactly who I was. That hit, not visibly, but enough. because for the first time, Clarence didn't respond immediately. He just looked at her, really looked, and something in that silence felt different, less controlled. Harriet's voice softened slightly, but only slightly. "Do you have any idea what that looked like?" she continued. "Standing there while you erased me?" A pause. Then, "That was intentional," he said. The honesty in his tone stopped her. Her brows pulled together. "Why?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped closer, closing the gap between them even more. Now, there was no space left for neutrality, just awareness. Harriet felt it, every inch of it. Her pulse shifted, not from fear this time, from something else, something sharper, more complicated. "You're asking the wrong question," he said quietly. Her breath caught slightly. "Then give me the right one," she replied. Another pause, this one heavier. Then, "Why do you think you're here?" he asked. The question caught her off guard. Her frustration flickered into confusion. "What does that have to do with anything?" she said. "Answer it." His tone wasn't raised, but it wasn't optional either. Harriet held his gaze, her mind racing. "I'm here because I earned the position," she said finally. A faint shift in his expression. Not agreement, not disagreement, just acknowledgement. "That's part of it," he said. Her eyes narrowed. "Part of it." He stepped even closer now, close enough that the air between them felt different. Charged. Heavy. "You don't get placed in my division by accident," he continued. Harriet's heartbeat slowed slightly. Not calmer, more focused. "Then what are you saying?" she asked. Clarence's gaze didn't leave hers. "Not for a second. I knew who you were before you walked into that building," he said. The words landed hard. Harriet froze. "What?" she whispered. But he didn't stop. "I knew your background, your file, your performance metrics, your recommendations." Her mind struggled to catch up. "That doesn't," she started. "It means," he interrupted, "that none of this is random." Silence filled the space between them. But it wasn't empty anymore. It was loaded, with meaning, with implication, with something she hadn't been prepared for. Harriet took a small step back this time, not out of fear, out of recalibration. "You're saying you chose me?" she asked slowly. A pause. Then, "Yes." The answer came without hesitation, without doubt, without softness. And somehow, that made it heavier. Harriet's thoughts scrambled again. "Why me?" The question rose instantly. Stronger now, more urgent. Her voice dropped slightly. "Why?" Clarence studied her. For a long moment. Long enough to make the silence feel intentional. Long enough to make her feel seen in a way she didn't fully understand. And then, he said the one thing that changed everything. "You think I brought you here by accident?" Nothing about the next few days made sense. And that was the problem. Harriet Williams had expected one of two outcomes after that conversation. Distance or discipline. What she got instead was something far more complicated. The first shift was subtle, almost invisible. If she hadn't been paying attention, she might have missed it entirely. But Harriet had learned quickly. Nothing around Clarence Jones happened by accident. Let's move on from that model. The voice came from the head of the conference table. Calm, controlled as always. Harriet looked up from her tablet. An analyst across from her had just finished presenting a set of projections. Ones Harriet had reviewed briefly earlier that morning. They weren't wrong, but they weren't right either. She had noticed it, but she hadn't spoken. Not yet. Not after what happened last time. "Miss Williams," Clarence said suddenly. Her name again. Clear. Direct. Harriet's posture straightened instantly. "Yes, sir." He didn't look at her immediately. Instead, he tapped the edge of the table once. "Your input." The room shifted. Attention moved. Subtle, but undeniable. Harriet felt it. The expectation. The pressure. The weight. She hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, then spoke. "There's a discrepancy in the projection baseline," she said, keeping her voice steady. "The growth curve assumes a market response that hasn't been validated by the current data set." Silence followed. Not hostile, not supportive, just waiting. The analyst frowned slightly. "We accounted for market variance." Harriet nodded. "Yes, but the model overcorrects for it." A pause. Then, Clarence spoke. "She's right." Just 2 words. Calm, unemotional, final. The room adjusted instantly. The analyst didn't argue, didn't push back. He simply nodded once and made a note. And just like that, the conversation moved on. But Harriet didn't. Not internally. Because something about that moment stayed with her. He hadn't just acknowledged her. He had backed her. Openly. Without hesitation. Without explanation. And in a room like this, that meant something. The second shift was less subtle, but harder to understand. Later that afternoon, Harriet found herself reviewing a set of financial summaries at her desk, her focus sharp but strained. She had been at it for nearly an hour, cross-checking, recalculating, adjusting. Something wasn't aligning, and the longer she stared at it, the more it refused to make sense. Frustration crept in slowly, quiet, controlled, but building. She leaned back slightly, exhaling under her breath. Come on. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard again, then paused, because something had changed. Not in the data, in the space around her. That same awareness. Subtle. Familiar. She looked up. Clarence was standing a few feet away from her desk. No announcement. No sound. Just presence. Harriet's breath caught slightly. How long have you been standing there? She asked. A minute. Of course. She turned her screen slightly toward him. There's an inconsistency in the report. I can't find where it's coming from. He stepped closer. Not too close, but enough to see. His gaze moved across the screen quickly. Efficient. Precise. Then, he reached forward. One small adjustment. One recalculation. And there it was. The error. Hidden. Subtle. Missable. Unless you were looking for it. Harriet blinked. I checked that twice. You checked the numbers, he replied. Not the assumption behind them. Her jaw tightened slightly. Not from irritation. From awareness. He wasn't correcting her the way he had in the meeting. This was different. Quieter. More contained. She nodded once. Got it. A pause. Then he stepped back, creating distance again, like the moment hadn't meant anything. Like he hadn't just helped her. That was the problem. The inconsistency. In public, he was distant, controlled, uncompromising. In private, he was something else. Still controlled. Still unreadable. But not distant. Not entirely. And Harriet didn't know what to do with that. By the third day, people started noticing. Not openly. Not directly. But enough. Glances lingered longer. Conversations quieted when she walked past. And during meetings, there was a shift. Subtle, but present. An awareness of her position. Not just as a new hire, but as someone close to him. Even if no one said it. Even if no one confirmed it. They saw it. And Harriet felt it. Every second of it. She stood near the window later that evening, reviewing notes from the day, her reflection faintly visible against the bright city skyline. Her mind wasn't on the work. It was on him, on the contradictions, on the pattern she couldn't quite define. Is he helping me? The thought came slowly, carefully, or controlling me, because every move he made, every correction, every moment of support, felt intentional, not random, not accidental, designed, and that realization unsettled her more than anything else. She turned slightly, her gaze shifting across the office floor. People moved, worked, focused, everything normal, everything controlled. But then, she felt it again. That same awareness. Stronger this time. More direct. Harriet's eyes shifted instinctively. Across the room, toward the glass wall of his office. And for a brief second, she saw him, standing inside. Still, watching. Not distracted. Not working. Watching her. Their eyes almost met. Almost. But the moment broke. Because he turned away. Just slightly. Like it hadn't happened. Like he hadn't been there. Like she hadn't felt it. Harriet stood still. Her breath slower now. Her thoughts sharper. Because this time, she was certain. This wasn't just coincidence. This wasn't just professionalism. This wasn't just control. There was something else here. Something unspoken. Something building. And something dangerous. Her fingers tightened slightly around the tablet in her hand. Because for the first time, she wasn't just trying to keep up anymore. She was trying to understand him. And that felt like the bigger risk. Because she almost caught him, staring at her longer than necessary. The office didn't empty all at once. It faded. Gradually. Quietly. until the structured rhythm of the day gave way to something softer, less controlled, but not entirely free. By the time the last wave of employees filtered out, Blackwell Global Enterprises felt different. Still bright, still immaculate, but quieter in a way that made every movement more noticeable, every sound more intentional. Harriet Williams remained at her desk long after she should have left. Her screen was still on, her notes still open, but she hadn't been reading them for the past 10 minutes. Because her mind wasn't on the work anymore. It was on him, on the way he had backed her in the meeting, on the way he had corrected her privately, on the way he had looked at her, or almost looked at her, and most of all, on the question she still couldn't answer. Why me? She exhaled slowly, leaning back in her chair. This doesn't make sense, she murmured under her breath. But nothing about this situation had made sense from the beginning. Not the parking garage, not the elevator, not the meeting, and definitely not this strange, shifting balance between distance and attention. Her fingers tapped lightly against the edge of her desk. Once, twice, then stopped, because she felt it again. That presence. Subtle, familiar, unmistakable. Harriet didn't turn immediately. She didn't need to. Working late, his voice came from behind her. Calm, low, closer than expected. She turned slowly. Clarence Jones stood a few feet away, his jacket off now, sleeves rolled slightly at the wrists. The sharp formality of the day had softened, but not disappeared. He still looked composed, still controlled, but less distant. Harriet straightened slightly. So are you? A faint pause. Then, I usually am. Of course he was. She studied him for a moment, then looked back at her screen. I didn't realize CEOs stayed this late, she added. I don't usually, he replied. That made her look at him again. Something about that answer felt intentional, like it was meant to mean more than it sounded. The silence stretched, not uncomfortable, but charged. Harriet turned her chair, slightly, to face him fully now. Is there something you needed? She asked. Direct. Clear. Because she wasn't going to pretend this was casual. Not anymore. Clarence didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked closer. Slow. Measured. Then stopped beside her desk. Not across from her this time. Beside her. That difference mattered. I wanted to make something clear, he said. Her chest tightened slightly. About what? She asked. A pause. Then, about the way I've handled this. Handled this. Not denied it. Not avoided it. Acknowledged it. That alone shifted something. Harriet's posture straightened subtly. Okay. Clarence's gaze moved briefly across the office. Empty now, quiet, controlled, before returning to her. I recognized you the moment you walked into that garage, he said. The words landed cleanly. No hesitation. No build-up. Just truth. Harriet's breath caught slightly. You said that before, she replied, her voice steady, but softer now. I'm saying it again, he said. Not defensive, not emotional, just certain. Her eyes searched his face. Why? This time, he answered. Because I don't usually repeat things that matter unless I need to make sure they're understood. That wasn't the answer she meant, but still landed. Harriet leaned back slightly, crossing her arms. Then help me understand it, she said. Silence. But not the kind that avoided. The kind that weighed. Chose. Clarence exhaled quietly, his posture shifting just enough to signal something different. Less corporate. More real. You weren't supposed to stand out, he said. Harriet frowned. That's not exactly something I control. I know, he replied. That softened the edge slightly. But you did, he continued. From the beginning. She shook her head faintly. Because I spilled coffee on you? A faint, almost invisible shift in his expression. No, he said. That just made it unavoidable. That answer stayed between them. Heavy. Unfinished. Harriet's voice lowered. Then what made it start? Another pause. Longer this time. And when he spoke, it wasn't as controlled as before. I reviewed your file weeks before you started, he said. Your work. Your progression. The way you handle pressure. Her heartbeat slowed slightly. Not calmer. More focused. And, she asked. Clarence held her gaze. And you didn't match the environment you were stepping into, he said. That could have sounded like criticism. But didn't. Not the way he said it. Meaning, she pressed. Meaning, he said slowly, You weren't supposed to adapt as quickly as you have. That caught her off guard. Her brows pulled together slightly. That doesn't explain anything, she said. It explains everything, he replied. A pause. Then he stepped a little closer. Not enough to overwhelm, but enough to shift the space again. I couldn't treat you like the others, he said. There it was. The line. Clear. Unavoidable. Harriet's breath slowed. Her thoughts didn't. Why? She asked quietly. And for the first time since she had met him, Clarence didn't answer immediately. Not because he didn't know, because he was choosing how much to say. Finally, I needed to see how you handled pressure without interference, he said. That part made sense. It fit, but it wasn't all of it. Harriet could feel that. You're leaving something out, she said. His eyes didn't leave hers. I always do, he replied. That almost made her laugh. Almost. But the moment was too tight for that. Too real. Her voice dropped slightly. And now? A pause. Then, now it's not as simple. That answer changed something. Subtly, but enough. Harriet felt it in the way her chest tightened, in the way her thoughts slowed, in the way the space between them felt smaller. Why not? She asked. Clarence studied her for a long moment. Long enough to make her aware of everything. The distance, the silence, the weight of the moment. And then, he said the one thing she hadn't been prepared for. This isn't just business for me. The words didn't echo. They settled, deep, and Harriet didn't respond. Not immediately, because for the first time, she didn't know how. The silence didn't break. It deepened. Clarence Jones' words still lingered in the air between them. Quiet, steady, undeniable. This isn't just business for me. Harriet Williams stood frozen for a moment, her heart no longer racing in panic, but shifting into something far more dangerous. Something softer, something real. The office around them was still bright, bathed in clean white light and the golden glow of the city beyond the glass. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same, because this time there was no confusion left. Harriet slowly rose from her chair. Her movements were calm, controlled, but her eyes never left his. Then stop treating it like it is, she said quietly. Her voice wasn't defensive anymore. It wasn't frustrated. It was honest. And that honesty landed harder than any argument they had shared before. Clarence didn't respond immediately. He watched her, really watched her, like he wasn't studying her anymore, but seeing her, not as an employee, not as a variable, but as someone who had stepped into his world and refused to disappear inside it. You think I don't know what this is? He asked. Harriet took a step closer. Then say it, she replied. The kind that stretches just long enough to matter. Clarence exhaled slowly, like control itself had become something he had to consciously hold on to. That's exactly what I've been trying not to do. Harriet stopped just a breath away from him now, close enough to feel the shift in his presence, close enough to understand that whatever stood between them now wasn't fear. It was choice. You don't get to hide behind control anymore, she said softly. Not with me. That hit, not sharply, but deeply, because she was right. From the moment he met her, he had tried to control everything. The distance, the silence, the narrative. But Harriet had stepped into every version of that control and stood her ground. And now, there was nowhere left to hide. Clarence took one final step forward. The distance between them disappeared. Not dramatically, not suddenly, just naturally, like it had always been meant to. His voice lowered, not commanding, not distant, just real. You changed the way I see everything the moment you walked into that building, he said. Harriet's breath caught. Because this wasn't power. This wasn't strategy. This was truth. And you tried to ignore that, she said. I tried to control it, he corrected. A faint smile touched her lips. Same thing. For a moment, he almost smiled too. But instead, his hand lifted slightly, hesitating just before reaching hers. That hesitation said everything. Not uncertainty. Harriet noticed. And this time she didn't wait. She closed the distance herself. Her fingers brushed against his. Soft. Intentional. Certain. Clarence stilled for half a second. Then slowly, he held her hand. Not tightly. Not possessively. Just enough to say, I'm not pulling away. The world outside the glass continued moving. Cars. Lights. people. But inside that office, time slowed. Because for the first time since they met, neither of them was pretending. Harriet looked up at him, her voice quieter now. Do you still think I don't belong here? Clarence's grip on her hand tightened just slightly. You don't belong in a place that tries to limit you, he said. Then softer. But you belong exactly where you choose to stand. Her chest tightened, not from pressure, from something warmer, something steady. And where do I choose to stand? She asked. His answer came without hesitation. Right here. That was it. No grand speech. No overcomplication. Just clarity. And somehow, that made everything else fall into place. Harriet exhaled slowly, her thumb brushing lightly against his hand without thinking. You're still my boss, she said, a faint shift in his expression. Professionally, he replied. And everything else? She asked. A quiet pause. Then, that depends on you. That answer didn't feel like control. It felt like permission, and Harriet understood the difference. For the first time since she walked into Blackwell Global Enterprises, she wasn't reacting. She was choosing. She stepped closer, not stopping this time, not hesitating. And when she spoke, her voice was soft but certain. I'm not afraid of this. Clarence searched her face for any sign of doubt. There wasn't any. Only clarity. Only intention. Only her. Neither am I, he said. And that was the moment. Not loud. Not dramatic. But undeniable. He lifted his free hand gently, brushing a loose strand of hair back from her face. The gesture was simple, careful, and somehow more intimate than anything else that had passed between them. Harriet didn't pull away. She leaned into it, just slightly, just enough. And then, he closed the distance. Not rushed, not forceful, but certain. Their kiss wasn't overwhelming. It wasn't reckless. It was quiet, steady, like something that had been building from the very first moment they collided, finally finding its place. When they pulled apart, the world didn't rush back and immediately. It lingered, soft, golden, real. Harriet let out a quiet breath, her forehead resting lightly against his for just a second. This is a terrible idea, she whispered. Clarence's voice came just as quietly. It is. Then, are you going to stop? She asked. No, he said. She smiled. Neither am I. The city lights flickered beyond them, reflecting across the glass walls like something out of a dream. Bright, warm, endless. And in that moment, there was no hierarchy, no titles, no distance. Just two people who had fought against something they couldn't ignore anymore, and finally stopped trying. The office lights dimmed slightly as the building shifted into night mode. But one space remained illuminated. One moment remained untouched. Because this wasn't where their story became complicated. It was where it became real. And for the first time, Harriet Williams didn't feel like she was stepping into something uncertain. She felt like she had finally found something worth staying for. And Clarence Jones, for the first time in a long time, was no longer in control of everything. And he didn't want to be. Because this time, it wasn't about power. It wasn't about strategy. It wasn't about control. It was about love. And this time, they chose it. If you love powerful, emotional, slow-burn romance stories like this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Golden Love Stories. And tell me, backhand index pointing right, did you feel that final moment? Also, if you haven't watched part 1, click on this video up here to watch so you will understand. See you in our next story.